Emma moved quietly among the gleaming tables of l'Essence, a prestigious restaurant nestled in the heart of the city's upscale district. Though the place bustled with frenetic energy, she kept to the background, balancing a tray of sparkling glasses with practiced ease. Her simple waitress uniform contrasted sharply with the shimmering evening gowns and tailored suits that filled the dining room, but Emma walked with a quiet assurance born from years of dedication. Tonight, like every other night, she hoped to earn a little more than just a paycheck, perhaps a chance to prove herself beyond the role she'd been assigned. In the kitchen, the heart of the restaurant's magic and chaos, Chef Laurent presided with icy authority. Tall and sharply dressed in his pristine white coat, he exuded an air of superiority that intimidated everyone in his domain. Known for his intricate, ambitious dishes and relentless perfectionism, Laurent had earned a reputation for dismissing anyone he deemed unworthy, a category that, as far as he was concerned, included Emma. Tonight, as the heat of the dinner service paled beneath the tension of his gaze, he noticed the waitress's quiet interest in the culinary ballet unfolding before her. "Emma," Laurent called suddenly, his tone dripping with condescension as he leaned against the doorway of the kitchen. The words cut through the din momentarily. "Come here. I want you to prepare the coquille Saint-Jacques. It's not for the faint of heart." The corners of his mouth curved into a smirk. "Let's see if you're worth watching, or if you should stick to clearing tables." The kitchen staff paused, eyes flickering between Emma and Laurent, sensing the challenge was more than just a test, it was a setup. Emma's pulse quickened, heart pounding with a mix of fear and a strange flicker of hope. The night had taken a daring turn, and the entire kitchen waited, breathless. The kitchen, usually alive with controlled chaos, the sizzling of pans, the clatter of pots, the sharp orders exchanged between cooks, fell suddenly into an uneasy silence after Chef Laurent's command echoed through the space. Emma stood frozen for a moment, the weight of everyone's staring eyes pressing down on her like the heavy heat from the stove. The coquille Saint-Jacques was no ordinary dish, it was a signature creation, demanding precision and technical mastery. Laurent's challenge wasn't a casual request, it was a deliberate provocation. "Are you even listening, Emma?" Laurent's voice cut through the silence, sharp and mocking. "It's scallops with a mushroom cream sauce, gratinade in the shell. If you can't handle the basics, maybe you should leave the kitchen, and the restaurant, during service." His tone suggested not just disbelief but contempt, as if the very idea of Emma cooking such a dish was laughable. "Get to it." Emma's hands trembled slightly as she took a step forward, the heat hitting her full force now not just from the stove but from the room's collective scrutiny. Her cheeks flushed, and her breath quickened. She had watched the cooks prepare that dish countless times before, but never dared to try it herself. Now, under Laurent's stern gaze and the wholesale attention of the kitchen staff, it was no longer a test of skill, it was a spectacle meant to expose her inadequacies. A few of the cooks exchanged quick glances, some smirking with barely concealed amusement. One of the junior chefs, Alan, whispered, "This is going to be a disaster." Another, Marie, shot a sympathetic glance at Emma but knew better than to interfere. The line chefs had learned long ago that challenging Chef Laurent's opinion was a risk reserved for those with tenure and courage, neither of which Emma had. Emma's fingers shook as she moved towards the prep station, the shellfish and ingredients laid out under the harsh fluorescent lights. She glanced at the raw scallops, perfectly plump and glistening, then at the recipe pinned on the board, a complex blend of sauces, timings, and finishing techniques. The reality hit her like a wave. Laurent wasn't just testing if she could cook. He was setting her up for humiliation, expecting her to fail in front of everyone. "Need a hand, Emma?" Alan's voice was low, hesitant. Emma shook her head, not wanting pity or the appearance of weakness. "No, I can manage," she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. Laurent paced behind her, arms crossed, letting silence hang before launching into a biting commentary. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said without looking at her. "I hope the next shift you spend learning instead of drifting around like a lost child." His words cut deep, stinging not just because of their venom but because of the truth they hinted at. She was unseen here, underestimated. Emma swallowed hard but kept her focus. She rinsed the scallops, her hands steadying as she methodically prepared the mushroom cream sauce. She didn't have Lauren's flamboyance or a culinary degree to back her up, but she knew flavors, and she had an eye for detail. The kitchen watched as she worked, subtle smirks replaced by smirks of anticipation, eager to see the inevitable mess unfold. Minutes dripped like hours. Emma coated the scallops gently, arranged them in their shells, and slid the tray into the broiler. Laurent leaned in, his face a mask of barely suppressed smug satisfaction. "Be sure not to burn it, Emma," he sneered. "We wouldn't want you to ruin the whole service." The broiler timer dinged, and Emma pulled out the dish, the cheese and sauce bubbling perfectly golden atop the scallops. She plated it carefully, adding a garnish with an intuitive touch. The kitchen fell into an expectant hush. For a beat, no one moved. Then Chef Laurent stepped forward, leaning closer for inspection. His eyes narrowed, lips pursed as he tasted the dish. For a long moment, the tension was suffocating. Then, hesitantly, he relaxed his face, though only slightly, and took another bite. The room tilted uncertainly, as if sensing that something unexpected was unfolding. "Well," Laurent finally muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "It's acceptable." The word hung oddly vague. No confirmation, no outright praise. Emma met his gaze, swallowing the lump in her throat. The cooks nearby exchanged incredulous looks, whispers starting to ripple. Alan bumped her shoulder gently and said, "You did better than I thought." But Laurent quickly regained his harsh tone. "Don't think this changes anything. You're still a waitress, below the line where real cooking happens." His voice raised just enough for all to hear. "If you want to survive here, you'll remember your place." Embarrassed and humiliated, Emma felt heat rush to her face again. Her stomach churned, and despite the polite murmurs of admiration from a few staff, the weight of Lauren's scorn and the public spotlight nearly crushed her. The dining room murmured with curious glances, some guests watching from their tables towards the open kitchen window, adding to her mortification. Quickly, she gathered the plates to deliver them to the guests, hands trembling slightly as she walked through the dining room. Back in the kitchen, some of the younger cooks tried to offer encouraging nods, but the atmosphere remained charged with Lauren's dominance. Emma slipped into the break room for a moment, leaning against the cold wall to steady her breath. Her mind buzzed with doubt and swirling emotions, anger, shame, hope. She pulled out her phone and called Mia, her closest friend and former culinary schoolmate, hoping for quiet encouragement. "Mia, it's worse than I thought. Lauren's making a spectacle of me," Emma whispered, voice cracking slightly. "What happened?" Mia's voice was soft, concerned. "He dared me to cook that signature dish tonight. Said it's too complex for a waitress. Everyone's watching. I don't know if I can pull this off." Emma's words trembled with vulnerability. She was ready to give up, and the instinct to flee was overwhelming. But Mia's steady voice cut through her despair. "You're better than he thinks. You've got this. Remember why you started. Don't let him steal your fire." Emma ended the call and took a deep breath, the brief reprieve bolstering her resolve. She headed back into the now buzzing kitchen, but before she could blend back into her duties, Laurent blocked her path. "Not so fast," he said, his smirk sharper now that he sensed her momentary spark of defiance. "I want you to prepare the next round of that dish. It's simple for me, but let's see if you can keep the pace up. If you can't, you'll be cleaning more than just tables." The kitchen staff hushed, tension crackling like electricity around her. Emma's heart pounded, her hands locking instinctively at her sides. She could see the doubt in some eyes shifted to anticipation, as if waiting for her to falter again. The pressure mounted until it felt like the entire world leaned on her shoulders. Chef Laurent's eyes gleamed with satisfaction at the power he wielded. He was sure he had broken her spirit. He didn't realize that beneath that quiet exterior was a resolve now burning brighter than ever. As Emma squared her shoulders for this second challenge, the room held a collective breath, the moment suspended between humiliation and hope. For Emma, it was a silent question: would she crumble under Laurent's scorn, or prove him wrong when it mattered most? Emma took a slow breath, the kind that stretches from deep inside, pulling strength from places she hadn't yet realized she had. The kitchen's bustling noise faded to a distant hum as she focused on the task at hand. Laurent's gaze was a weight on her back, the entire staff watching like vultures waiting for a misstep. But beneath their eyes, determination ignited in her chest, a flicker growing into a steady flame. She approached the prep station with confidence this time, moving with a grace that surprised even herself. Months of watching, learning quietly in the background, had given her more than just familiarity. She had absorbed technique and intricacies like a sponge. Though she hadn't donned the chef's coat or claimed formal recognition, the knowledge was there, nestled beneath years of circumstance. The scallops lay before her, pristine and succulent. She rinsed them gently under cold water, then patted each dry with clean towels. Quickly, she began assembling the mushroom cream sauce, finely chopping porcini and button mushrooms, simmering them slowly with shallots and garlic until fragrant. Laurent's sharp eyes flicked suspiciously, but Emma did not waver. She added a touch of the heavy cream, folded in fresh thyme, and allowed the sauce to thicken to the perfect consistency. Memories of her apprenticeships flooded back, techniques she had learned but kept hidden, protecting the fragile dreams she quietly nurtured. The kitchen around her seemed to shrink, the chatter dimming until only the sounds of her own movements filled her ears, the rhythmic clinking of knife against board, the careful simmering of sauce, the tender handling of scallops as she prepared each shell. She assembled the dish with meticulous care, layering flavors precisely as the recipe demanded, but then she added something extra. Instead of the standard garnish, Emma picked fresh microgreens and thin shavings of black truffle, a hint she had observed Laurent use sparingly before, something that elevated the dish's elegance and aroma. It was a risk, adding her own twist in Laurent's kitchen, but she trusted her instincts. Sliding the tray under the broiler, she watched the cheese bubble and brown, the scent filling the kitchen. Chef Laurent's pursed lips betrayed an unspoken tension. The silence stretched as the timer, crisp and final, dinged, signaling the moment of truth. Emma pulled the tray out with steady hands and began plating. The dish looked flawless, the light golden gratin perfectly melted over the tender scallops nestled in their shells. A final flourish of the microgreens dusted with truffle brought an elegant finish, a subtle power hidden in simplicity. Laurent sauntered closer, his eyes narrowing as he leaned in to taste. For a moment, the whole kitchen held its breath. He closed his eyes, chewing slowly, his face revealing nothing as he swallowed. The seconds felt like an eternity. Then, Laurent blinked and opened his eyes. "This is exceptional," he admitted, voice low and reluctant, as if the words pained him. The entire kitchen stilled in stunned silence. Emma's heart thundered, hope blooming in the space of disbelief. Some of the younger cooks exchanged surprised looks, murmurs rippling among them. Marie nudged Alan, whispering, "I didn't expect that. She really knows her craft." Even the sous chef, usually indifferent, nodded approvingly. The dynamic shifted visibly. Laurent's smirk faded, replaced by a brief flash of something close to respect mingled with irritation. He swallowed a retort, his pride bruised dangerously. The power he wielded felt fragile now, threatened by the very person he had sought to humiliate. The kitchen erupted quietly, not with laughter at Emma's supposed failure, but with restrained applause and whispered praise. Emma, cheeks tinted with an awkward flush, met the eyes of her colleagues. Some were hesitant, unsure how to greet this, but most looked at her with genuine admiration for the first time. Laurent stepped back, arms crossed tightly over his chest, jaw clenched as if fighting to maintain control. His words softened, "Well, you'll need to maintain that standard," if you wish to keep working here. The challenge hung heavy in the air, but the undertone had changed. There was no longer the sneer of scorn but a wary acknowledgement that Emma was no longer just a waitress in his sight. Emma nodded, swallowing the swirl of emotions. Relief struggled with pride, fear with newfound confidence. As the night wore on, guests complimented the dish. Whispers of, "Who made the coquille Saint-Jacques?" floated through the dining room, each time the answer being, Emma. She felt a warmth growing, one not born from applause but from the recognition of her skill breaking through the walls that had kept her out. Laurent, meanwhile, sat quietly in the corner of the chef's office later that evening, brooding. His reputation and authority had suffered a crack, and that bruised vanity would not heal easily. The power dynamic in the kitchen had shifted subtly but irrevocably. The true victory, however, was Emma's. The next day, she noticed that some of the cooks greeted her with nods rather than glances of pity or amusement. The kitchen was a different place now, less hostile, more open. Word traveled through the staff and even to the front of house. The restaurant owner, Madame Dubois, a sharp and discerning woman known for her high standards, caught wind of the night's events. She was intrigued by this quiet waitress's unexpected rise to culinary excellence under Laurent's nose. Emma's moment had arrived. No longer invisible, no longer underestimated. Her patience, talent, and resilience had unveiled a new beginning. The kitchen, which had once felt like a cage, was poised to become her stage. In the quiet moments after the rush, Emma stood alone by the stove, gazing at the polished workspace. She allowed herself a tentative smile, fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of a plate. She had faced the impossible and triumphed, not just over Laurent's scorn, but over the invisible barriers she had lived with for so long. The restaurant had witnessed her transformation. And Emma knew this was just the start of something greater. Days passed since Emma's unexpected triumph in the kitchen, yet the memory of that night lingered vividly in her mind like a flame rekindled. While Laurent's cold glare hadn't vanished entirely, the sharp edge of his disdain dulled, replaced by a reluctant professional respect that he tried hard to mask. Meanwhile, the atmosphere among the rest of the staff had shifted palpably. Emma found herself no longer relegated to the margins but cautiously included in conversations about the menu and preparations. It was as though she'd stepped through an invisible barrier, emerging into the light of recognition she had quietly longed for. But beneath her calm exterior, Emma carried a story few knew. Her modest waitress uniform and unassuming demeanor concealed a past that explained both her skill and her humility. One afternoon, during a rare lull in service, Marie found Emma alone cleaning the silverware in the back room. The two women had exchanged polite smiles in passing, but today the guarded warmth blossomed into something more genuine. "You really surprised us all that night," Marie said tentatively, folding a pristine linen napkin. "I never imagined someone like you could pull off a dish so complex. You have a real knack. You don't have to stay hidden." Emma looked up, eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. For a long moment, she weighed whether to let her walls down, the same walls that had protected her from judgment and failure for years. Taking a deep breath, Emma began. "I studied at Le Cordon Bleu." The words dropped softly but carried the weight of a confession. "I loved cooking. It was everything to me. But my family went through a tough time. My father's illness drained our savings. I had to take any job I could find. This one, waiting tables, seemed like a temporary stop." She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I didn't want people to know. I wasn't ready to face questions or pity." Marie's eyes widened in surprise. "You're a trained chef. I would have never guessed." Emma nodded. "I kept training on my own, reading cookbooks, practicing whenever I could. But this job kept me grounded, or maybe it just kept me invisible." She paused, touching the edge of the freshly cleaned silverware. "Tonight was more than just cooking the dish. It was proving to myself that I hadn't lost that part of me." Marie leaned in, her voice warm. You deserve to be in the kitchen, Emma. Don't hide your talent. The conversation settled something deep in Emma's heart. She realized that her simple attire wasn't a reflection of who she was but a shield she had worn for protection, and now, perhaps, it was time to drop it. That evening, as the dining room filled once again, Emma found herself walking with more purpose toward the kitchen. Laurent observed her approach with hawk-like scrutiny, but his expression was more guarded than threatening. Moments later, Madame Dubois, the restaurant's owner, appeared unexpectedly in the kitchen doorway. Known for her sharp eyes and impeccable standards, Madame Dubois rarely interrupted service unless necessary. Her presence was immediately felt, a mix of curiosity and authority. "Emma," she said quietly but clearly, causing several cooks to straighten in attention, "I've heard about your performance last week. You have a certain talent, yes?" Emma blinked, slightly taken aback. "Thank you, Madame Dubois. I try my best." Madame Dubois smiled softly. "I'd like to speak with you after service. There are possibilities here that you might want to consider." Word spread quickly, the murmur of intrigue weaving through the staff. Laurent's jaw tightened briefly, though he said nothing aloud. When the night's rush finally subsided and the last guests departed, Emma entered the quiet office where Madame Dubois awaited. The walls were lined with menus and accolades, a testament to the restaurant's prestige. Madame Dubois gestured to a chair. "Sit, Emma. Tell me about yourself. What brought you here?" Emma hesitated, then told her story with honesty: the culinary school dreams, the family struggles, the choice to work as a waitress to stay afloat. "I see strength in you," Madame Dubois said, studying Emma thoughtfully. "Talent alone isn't enough in this business. But the resilience you've shown? That's something rare. Laurent is an excellent chef, but I wonder if his arrogance sometimes blinds him." Emma swallowed, recalling Laurent's coldness, but said nothing. "I want to offer you a chance," Madame Dubois continued, "to join the kitchen staff officially, not just as support, but as junior chef. We'll start with small responsibilities and see where it leads. Are you ready to step forward?" Emma's heart pounded. This was the opportunity she had dreamed of but never dared to expect. "Yes, Madame Dubois. I'm ready." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of learning, adapting to new expectations, and proving herself again, not just to Laurent but to herself. Emma's hands moved with skill, her palate sharpened, and her confidence grew. She woke before dawn to study recipes and stayed late to practice techniques, determined not to waste the opportunity. Laurent's attitude was cool, but there were moments he offered begrudging acknowledgement, a nod here, a brief comment of advice there. The kitchen had adjusted to the new balance, and with it, Emma began to flourish. One afternoon, as Emma delicately plated a complex dessert Laurent had reluctantly entrusted her to prepare, he observed quietly, then said, "You've changed the kitchen dynamic. I suppose I'll have to keep an eye on you." She smiled at the rare compliment. "I'll keep cooking my best." Louise, the pastry chef, chimed in with a wink. "Better watch out, Laurent. She might be the best thing this kitchen's seen in years." Emma's journey had come full circle, from the waitress waiting tables to the woman who could, with skill and grace, outshine expectations and quiet doubt. Her simple uniform no longer defined her. Instead, her work did. When she finally donned the chef's coat provided by Madame Dubois, it felt less like a costume and more like a symbol of everything she'd endured and earned. The crisp fabric rested on her shoulders, urging her forward. And although challenges remained, Laurent's bruised pride, the pressures of a demanding kitchen, the ever-watchful eyes of customers expecting perfection, Emma faced them all armed with knowledge, resilience, and a passion that refused to be silenced. As she prepared for the next dinner service, Emma paused briefly, fingers pressed against the cold steel of the stove. The kitchen no longer felt like a battleground but a place where her dreams took shape. The moment was hers, and she was ready to claim it fully. The promotion came with little fanfare at first, but its impact rippled through the restaurant like a subtle shifting of tectonic plates. Madame Dubois summoned Laurent to her office with a firm expression, leaving the kitchen staff buzzing with anticipation and speculation. Emma, meanwhile, carried on with her duties, aware that the tides were turning in her favor but mindful not to let her confidence slip into arrogance. When Laurent finally emerged from the owner's office, his usual commanding presence seemed diminished. His shoulders slumped slightly, and the sharp gleam in his eyes was tempered by a strange humility. Word quickly spread: Laurent had been demoted to sous chef and Emma promoted to a junior executive chef, a change driven as much by his attitude as by her undeniable talent. The early shock gave way to a subtle celebration among the kitchen staff. Alan, who had once muttered doubts, now greeted Emma with a thumbs up. Marie's smile was warmer than ever. Even waiters who had barely noticed her presence before now nodded in respect as she passed. Laurent's fall from favor was not immediate, but it was certain. He sat alone in the kitchen one evening, his face etched with frustration and regret. The rigid pride that had once protected him lay fractured beneath nervous thoughts. His condescending remarks to Emma, once accepted as part of the kitchen's hierarchical culture, now felt like chains that bound him to the past. One quiet moment after service, Emma crossed paths with Laurent near the pantry. She stopped, and despite the tension, offered a simple greeting. "Chef Laurent," she said, voice steady. He looked up, eyes searching hers. "Emma," he replied, tone softer than before. There was an unspoken acknowledgement between them, an understanding that the old order had shifted. Laurent's dismissal of Emma's abilities had cost him more than just a title, it had cost him the dignity of respect. Days later, Laurent approached Madame Dubois with an unexpected proposal. "I'd like to help mentor Emma," he said quietly. "She has something special, and I want to learn from her, too." Madame Dubois regarded him thoughtfully. "That's a wise choice. You both stand to gain." Their truce, born of mutual respect rather than rivalry, brought a new energy to the kitchen. Emma welcomed the guidance and collaboration, understanding that leadership was not just about talent but about building bridges. As weeks rolled on, Emma's reputation blossomed beyond the walls of Lessons. Customers noted a fresh creativity in the dishes, a balance of tradition and innovation that delighted even the most discerning palates. The staff admired her calm command during the busiest nights, her ability to inspire rather than intimidate. One evening, as the last guests left and the kitchen wound down, Madame Dubois gathered the team. "Emma," she said, looking around the room, "you've shown all of us what determination and talent can do. This restaurant is proud to have you as part of its future." Emma felt the warmth rise in her chest, a blend of pride and gratitude. She scanned the room. Laurent nearby nodded with a small smile, Alan raised a bottle in salute, and Marie caught her eye with a grin full of encouragement. The journey from waitress to chef had not been easy. There had been moments of fear, doubt, and humiliation. But through it all, Emma had held on to her passion and resilience. As she closed the kitchen door behind her that night, she paused and turned back, looking at the gleaming counters, the knives, the ovens, the tools of her craft and the stage of her triumph. Everyone has a moment that defines them, she thought. What would you do if you were in my shoes? The story of Emma reminds us all to push beyond the limits set by others, to nurture our hidden strengths, and to rise with grace when given the chance. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more journeys of courage and hope. See you in our next story.